I don't think it's possible to say anything about Hollow Knight that hasn't already been said. The game is just too massive, and I'm not talking about its sprawling map, but rather the footprint it has left on gaming. There are countless videos dissecting its mechanics, story, lore, level design, boss fights, music, and memes. The game has been stripped down and dissected countless times over, to the point that the prospect of saying anything original about it seems akin to standing on the precipice gazing up at the absolute radiance. But I like a challenge, so today I'm going to try and say something new about Hollow Knight. The other day I was chatting with some online friends who I don't think I've discussed video games with before, but when one of us referenced Hollow Knight, the conversation suddenly ignited. You played Hollow Knight? I love Hollow Knight. Oh my gosh, I'm playing it now and I'm stuck. And this isn't the first time that's happened either. I'm not the most social person, and when I leave the house I don't exactly run around shouting the praises of Hollow Knight, but on just about every occasion, when I encounter someone who's played it, there's a sort of knowing look that washes over us, and you can almost see in their eyes that they are remembering the first time entering Greenpath, or fighting the Mantis Lords, and in that moment words aren't needed. Because, like the game's protagonist, we both silently understand. So why is Hollow Knight a game that causes that sensation? Why is it the sort of experience that you wish you could erase from your memory, just so you could experience it all again for the first time? Well, let's consider that question by measuring Hollow Knight across 4 arbitrary metrics: the gameplay, the world, the challenge, and the story. If you strip Hollow Knight down to its core, it is a pretty standard issue Metroidvania. I know that term gets thrown around a lot, so to be specific, it is a game contained within a very large map, most of which the player can't access from the start, but as you progress and unlock abilities, the world opens up and you are able to traverse more and more of the game. Many people attribute the burgeoning of this style to games like Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And while I'm not a game historian, I actually thought it was Castlevania titles on the Game Boy Advance that truly affected this format. But however you want to slice it, Hollow Knight follows the Metroidvania formula pretty faithfully, as players unlock the dash, wall grab, and double jump to traverse the world and battle ever increasingly difficult enemies and bosses. It's all pretty straightforward, while still being extremely refined. Hollow Knight's controls feel incredibly responsive, tight, and satisfying, while still being the best kind of challenging and fair. So to start on mechanics, I would say Hollow Knight is sheer perfection. So we've discussed the gameplay of Hollow Knight as being a fairly straightforward yet incredibly defined Metroidvania, which is something that there is no shortage of in gaming since the great Metroidvania revival of the 2010s. But what exactly makes Hollow Knight feel so unique? Why does it stand out in such a crowded field? I think the first thing you have to examine is the world of Hollow Knight. And again, I'm not simply referring to the game's sprawling map or the seemingly endless secret areas waiting to be discovered, but how nearly every area of this world is meticulously designed to impose a mood or sensation when the player first enters. Think of the claustrophobic dread that comes from finding yourself in Deep Nest, whether that was intentionally or accidentally, contrasted starkly by the calming tranquility of Greenpath, the sublime of insect civilization found in the City of Tears, to the peril imbued when descending into the royal waterways below. Now, you may think that much of the heavy lifting here is achieved by Christopher Larkin's soundtrack, which, without mincing words, is a phenomenal achievement. No, seriously, if you consider the sheer variety of styles, genres, and instrumentation found in the Hollow Knight soundtrack, the meticulous crafting of thematic melodies, and then go look at just how few credits Larkin has under his belt, it is simply mind-boggling how good this work truly is. But one thing I feel must be pointed out here is how the game and music work in tandem to create the world of Hollow Knight. How they feel like each was carefully crafted to work perfectly in sync with the other's goals. How everything in the world of Hollow Knight, from the level design, enemy design, and sound design, feed into one another to create this fully realized world that is oozing with character and life, despite much of it being a mostly desolate landscape. It is, I would say again, sheer perfection. Now, I'm no game designer, But I've often wondered if one of the reasons why Metroidvanias became so popular among indie game developers who are still finding their creative footing is because they lend themselves to a well-managed difficulty curve. A difficulty curve, for those that don't know, is how the level of challenge presented to the player increases as they progress through the game. In Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, for example, players can breeze through nearly the entire game without ever intentionally training up their Pokemon at all, until reaching the Elite Four and find that they've run into a brick wall, because this is a game with a poorly optimized difficulty curve, a game that doesn't naturally lead its players to meet the ever-escalating challenges it presents. Compare that to, say, Nightmare King Grim, a late-game boss fight which almost no one sees coming, and which kicks the absolute ass of everyone the first time they attempt it.
This is way too fast. I'm not... Okay. Wait. Okay.
The major difference here is that unlike getting obliterated by Cynthia, Nightmare King Grim doesn't confront the player with anything it hasn't seen before. There is a careful and deliberate progression leading up to the battle, and the player doesn't have to do anything in order to overcome it, just get good. And this is a perfect metaphor for the challenge of Hollow Knight itself. Everything from the controls, the mechanics, the fights, all follow a natural and gradual learning curve. Well, except for these guys. F them. But as far as the challenge in Hollow Knight, it is all carefully crafted, generously fair, sheer perfection. Now, this is where I will say something that many may find controversial. But after completing Hollow Knight's 4 main endings, I found that I didn't and still don't really care about the story, or at least not in the traditional sense. Most stories, particularly in video games, are a chronicling of the protagonist's journey. It can be a literal journey to a strange land of epic battles, or a stationary journey of self-discovery. But the main character of most any story is the vessel through which we, the audience, process the narrative. And in Hollow Knight, the protagonist, which is a literal vessel, doesn't really matter. The story culminates in him taking the place of another before him, and presumably will one day be replaced by another. Even if he fails, another will take his place as part of a cycle that is inevitable. And as a player, a lover of stories, and a storyteller in my own right, it isn't exactly an impactful story to impart on the player, particularly in an interactive medium. It is deeply flawed, even as a means to contain an otherwise flawless Metroidvania-style game. Or at least, I thought it was, until I thought more about it, because it turns out I lied. There aren't 4 dimensions to Hollow Knight because, as is fitting with a game that oozes secrets and depth behind every corner, there is a secret 5th dimension that I hadn't considered. Charm. And no, not those charms. I'm talking charm. That intangible trait that, like the infection that permeates Hallownest, seeps into all 4 of the previously defined traits. It's the charm in taking the system that players use to fast travel the map and funneling it into the Last Stag, an NPC character that oozes charm, and God, I could sit and listen to him tell tales about the old days of Hallownest for days. It's charm that elevates boss fights from a mere challenge to feeling like a carefully choreographed dance for players to learn and perfect. It's the charm of the world's design, from the rigid architecture and atmosphere of the City of Tears to the lakes pooling below the constant downpour, areas that feel inspired to their maximum capacity by insects and grubs and growths and dung. Charm is the lifeblood that permeates Hallownest. It is, in my opinion, what elevates Hollow Knight from just a damn good game to an unforgettable experience. And it was at this realization when it dawned on me that a conventional story centering around a conventional video game hero may have actually spoiled all that, because the story of Hollow Knight isn't the story of the player, but the world. The world is the main character, and the story of what it once was and what it will one day become is far more interesting than anything that could be imparted on a silly old hero. And that, I think, is what makes Hollow Knight a pretty special game. Thanks for watching. And if you'd like to see more of this series, please consider hitting that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what games you'd like to see covered. Thanks again.